Welcome everybody, and thanks again for joining us as we explore another historic space here in Cincinnati. I'm Craig Manis, Director of Business Operations with American Legacy Tours, and I'm coming to you today from historic St. Francis Seraph Church right in the heart of Over the Rhine, right on Liberty Street at the intersection of Vine Street. It is, of course, Good Friday. This is Easter weekend, so I'm wearing my favorite Easter pastels, coming to you from one of our favorite spots that we've been exploring on tours for 10 years now, St. Francis Seraph. Please make sure to subscribe to our channel for all future content and like our videos, and I'm really looking forward to showing off this beautiful church with you today. Before St. Francis Seraph would have been here, this would have been the site of the very first Catholic church in the entire greater Cincinnati area. This was the location of Christ Church. Christ Church was a one-story wooden-framed building. It was an Irish Catholic church, and it was constructed right here in 1819, which at the time would have been very rural Cincinnati. Shortly after that church opens up, Cincinnati got their very first bishop, Bishop Edward Fenwick. And Bishop Fenwick, he didn't like his new church being located so far from downtown and where all the people were located. So in 1822, he decides to relocate that church. And the Irish parishioners picked that church up off of its foundation. They put it upon timbers and proceed to roll it down the rather bumpy streets of Cincinnati. So how do you think that worked out for everybody? Not so well. They made it roughly one block before the church slides off those timbers, smashes to pieces. But those parishioners were determined to rebuild their church. They picked up every last piece and they rebuilt it down near 6th and Sycamore Streets, a few blocks south of here, where you'll find St. Xavier Church located today. In the 1840s, there was a great need to have German-speaking Catholic priests coming into the Over the Rhine neighborhood. This was a densely populated neighborhood of well over 45,000 people at the time, and 75% of which were German. There's only about 10,000 people living in the neighborhood today, just to give you an idea of how densely populated that would have been, and a very strong German population here in the area. A contingent of Franciscan friars from Tyrol, Austria come here, and they eventually settle right here on this site to build their church. But an issue that they ran into is just outside the building, there's a beautiful courtyard, and that would have been the very first Catholic graveyard in the Cincinnati area. So people were asked to come dig up their loved ones and bury them elsewhere. Some family members got together, and they found it to be a great honor to have their loved ones buried right here under the altar of the new church. So when St. Francis Seraph opens up in 1859, it opens up with a burial crypt directly underneath it. We're going to head down into that crypt right now. Follow me. Right now, we are in the burial crypt of St. Francis Seraph Church. We are located directly underneath the altar. The first chamber we're standing in, no one's actually buried in this room. This is just a way to display some more of those headstones down here in the crypt. There are 42 people that we know of buried down here. 42 people because the public records were essentially non-existent at the time as far as who made their way down here, but there are 42 markers, so we can assume there are at least 42 people buried in this burial crypt. Perhaps more than that, we just really don't know. Here we are in the burial crypt itself. Now there are, as I mentioned, 42 people we know of buried in this room, 42 burial markers, so there are at least 41 people, potentially more, buried here. A common question we get asked is, how are people buried? And for that, we really just do not know. It's most likely just a big mass grave. In all likelihood, there weren't a lot of remains left of folks when they were moved down here, so perhaps boxes of bones down here in this chamber, might not have even been full caskets. European crypts, typically people are buried vertically, but in this instance we don't know for sure. Most likely a large mass grave. We're going to head back into the other chamber of the crypt we started in. I'll show off some of these beautiful headstones for you folks. This is one of my personal favorite, Mrs. Mary Frantz. She has this adorable Victorian poem on the bottom of her headstone that reads, "Remember, friends, as you pass by, as you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you must be. Prepare for death and follow me." Real adorable and cute, isn't it? Now, there was a common response people would say at that time: "Before I follow and grant consent, I want to know which way you went." There's Mr. Patrick Coleman. I love the way that headstone starts off. Stranger pause. So since the original Christ Church here was Irish Catholic, you do see a lot of Irish names around here, a lot of Kellys, a lot of Kennedys. So pretty remarkable hidden space here in Cincinnati. You can come check it out on the full tour on our Queen City Underground tour. And we're going to head back up into the sanctuary. This area of the church here in the back we like to refer to as the old Friars Choir. Prior to the Second Vatican Council in the early 1960s, friars would have been cloistered off to the public. So just like monks are confined to their monasteries, friars would have been confined to the friary. And you would have friars back in this area during church service, the general public directly behind me in the main sanctuary, and a high altar piece would have stood right here, separating the friars from the general public. As you look up here, that's a reason you'll find this dual-sided crucifix. And that is so the crucifix could have been seen from both sides of that high altar piece. I want to point out some of the more unique physical attributes that you find here in the church. Of course, I showed you the friars' choir back here where the friars would have been located. You see these rather uncomfortable looking headrests back here. Those are not headrests at all. Those are designed to hold oil burning lamps or candles back before electricity would have been installed in the building. So those friars could have read the Bible and pray in the early morning hours or late evening hours before they would have had the assistance of natural sunlight. There are a few different symbols here located throughout the church. I'm going to point out just one in particular that you can see working its way into this pattern. Of course, that symbol would be the swastika. The swastika is not German. It comes from the Sanskrit language, thousands of years old, meaning the search for enlightenment, inner peace, also meaning rebirth, resurrection, which of course holds quite a meaning this weekend in the church, as today is Good Friday, and Easter is coming up in a couple days here. That symbol, as I said, originally came from Sanskrit. The Catholic Church started using it in the 1700s, spreading it to Catholic churches around the world. In the early 1900s, that symbol actually meant good luck. You'd find Coca-Cola using it in their advertisements. The Girls Club of America had a national publication called Swastika Monthly. Sells almost incredible a day since the Nazis would use that. And in the 1930s, they kind of ruined it for everybody. So a lot of churches had that removed. Here it is a part of the church that only clergy would have had access to. But we started bringing a lot of tour groups through here over the years, and we like to point out that symbol and explain why you find it here in the church. Me and some of the guides like to play a game trying to find some of these swastikas that have mistakes in them. You can find a couple here, right in the back area. The reason for these mistakes is the artist who laid the tile work said, only God is perfect. purposely put some inaccuracies into the artwork. Here on the back side of the altar, you can see another interesting symbol in the church. This is a mother stork, and as a mother stork runs low on food, she'll actually pierce her flesh and feed her chicks from her own body. You can see that symbolism in Christ and his sacrifice, so you can find the stork scattered often throughout the church in different artwork that they have around here. Pretty interesting symbol. Now, the stained glass here in the main sanctuary is original, dating back to 1859. Absolutely beautiful. No one knows the exact year the pipe organ was installed. We only know that that was sometime during the 1940s. They play it every Sunday. It's tuned once a year. It sounds absolutely beautiful. So that, friends, is the sanctuary here at St. Francis Seraph Church. I'd like to thank you all again for joining me on another fantastic tour through one of our historic spots here in Cincinnati. I would love to have all of you here with me, but since we can't do that, we're doing our best to bring the city to you. Please subscribe to our channel for all future content. Please like our videos, and I can't wait to see you all again soon in another historic spot right here in Cincinnati.